I'd like to welcome everybody this evening and thank you all for coming out to this presentation discussion with Dr. Robert Kraig on the subject of where do we go from here. This is being hosted by Grassroots Waukesha County. That there is plenty sympathy and plenty of energy in people for progressive change, even in a place like Waukesha County. So, without any further ado, I'd like everyone to give me a warm welcome to Dr. Robert Kraig.
Thank you, Mike. And it is just great to see all you progressives here in Waukesha. What we see right now is a real disconnect between our values, the way we think our society should be and what it could be, what is within our power to achieve, and the reality. And not just the reality, but the direction of things. With things like poverty and race-based economic and social disparities getting worse, not better. Now, the problem is that cynicism is our biggest foe. You see, we're the ones who believe, progressives are the ones who believe that our great experiment in democracy, I mean, that's what the United States gave to the world over 200 years ago, has great promise that we can achieve anything we want to achieve. The cynicism is cynicism about democracy itself. Conservatism right now, or the current version or variant of it that has gained control, actually believes that our government is the enemy, when our government is nothing but our own way of governing ourselves. It's our democracy. Here's the problem. When they run government poorly, take George Bush with Katrina being a classic example, it actually helps them. When Governor Walker privatizes the state's economic development, WEDC, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, and that's a disaster, it discredits government. And so what we need to do is we need to approach issues differently. We need to approach people where they live, what is emotional for them, what their concerns are, anxieties, and their hopes for the future for themselves and their families, and then show that certain issues or policies are the key to achieving that, and that we can achieve those things. That in fact, it's un-American to say we can't dramatically reduce poverty in this country. So what I want to say to you is that we're in a situation where we have to get back to fundamental values. And the policy needs to stem from the values. I'm going to give you 4 fundamental values and tell you what the battle over them is. And you use those to talk about policy. So for example, freedom. Freedom is the most core American value, right? So to conservatives, freedom is primarily negative. It is literally about someone violating the state, the government, violating someone's freedom to do something. Now, progressive freedom, the version of freedom, involves negative freedom, it involves discrimination, violations of people's rights, but it also involves something more positive and abstract. It involves the idea that people need certain conditions to be in place in order to have true freedom. They need access to a high-quality education. You need a stable and nutritious home life, a stable home life. That you need roads and bridges. You need, if you're trying to start a business, a trained workforce and all the infrastructure you need. You need to be able to get a higher education in a field that you want to pursue, where you can actually support a family and advance and live the American dream. So the problem is that that version of freedom is more abstract than simply a taking. It's not a visceral negative emotion. And also involves our common project together, our government, which they have undermined with cynicism. But what we need to do, say, on freedom, and I'll give a healthcare example, is to invest positive freedom with the same kind of moral emotion that conservative kind of taking away is able to trigger. And so, for example, in healthcare reform, as they like to call it, Obamacare, it's really a broad set of public structures that set up a situation where everyone can get affordable healthcare no matter what, or at least most people, but not all the way, but it's a huge advance forward. We need to say you need to have our democracy guarantee everyone should have somewhere to go to affordable healthcare no matter what, in order to prevent people from being thrown off their coverage and not coverage when they get sick. In other words, a negative taking away emotion, but then it's paired with a positive vision of what we need to do as a society. So let me give a second value, opportunity. Conservatives say this about opportunity. I'm giving you their value, fundamental value that underlies all of their policy claims. They say everyone who is moral, that is disciplined, independent, and hardworking, can make it. The free market provides opportunity to those who grasp it. Government attempts to redistribute rewards, severs the link between morality and success, undermining opportunity for all. So you do positive harm when you try to help people, unintended consequences. What you really need to do is to make people disciplined, independent, hardworking, and moral, and the moral people will be rewarded. Progressives say that the unregulated market traditional social structures are unjust if just left to their own devices. Only democratic government can ensure everyone has the opportunity to live with dignity and pursue their full potential by prohibiting discrimination and expanding the positive conditions necessary for everyone to move up and prosper. It's an argument that's harder to make, a values position that's harder to make. But first of all, it happens to be, I'll say this, it happens to be true. And second, if we do it right, we ought to be able to speak to people very directly and compassionately and point out that we as a society owe something to each other to create opportunity. I'll give you one more value. It's kind of community and cooperation. The conservative view of cooperation is that you have anarchy unless you have order, and that in a well-functioning society, people have the moral discipline to follow established authority. So it's kind of your old school kind of community, right? Where it's strict and you're supposed to follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, then you'll be punished, right? You won't succeed. Whereas progressives have a view of collaboration or community that says in essence that you'll have division and conflict without it, but is a robust public sphere that maximizes individual freedom, that in fact it'll be a war of all against all unless we create a system where we can work out our differences that allows the most people possible to prosper. Well, here's the problem. Conservative ideology is one based on no cooperation. So they are the ideology of obstruction. And nothing is clearer than healthcare reform. In healthcare reform, they are turning healthcare reform into the Northern Ireland of American politics, because they will not forget the debate of 2010. And they will do anything to undermine it. They will use every tactic possible to undermine it. And so are people aware of the Supreme Court case that has been taken up now? Yeah. So what's really interesting about that, this is where I want to model how we would do communication, and not just communication, organizing everything we do. A lot of healthcare advocates, Democrats and progressives, just want to crawl under a rock and say, oh my God, the Supreme Court's going to go, and they're going to take away subsidies from all the states that don't have their own exchange, right? I tell them we need to change public opinion enough so the Supreme Court won't dare do this. But the way to do that is to focus not on the Supreme Court, but on state and federal government. And so let's start with federal government. The opponents tend to be in red states, right, that did not build their own exchanges, right? So Congress could fix this alleged problem in one sentence. All they do is pass a sentence amendment, one line bill that says that subsidies in the Affordable Care Act apply to states with their own exchanges or states with federal exchanges. Period. Why won't they do it? Because they will not do anything to improve or help Obamacare, because it must go no matter what. So why aren't we creating this tremendous backlash against Congress for its sabotage of healthcare reform? So this is emotionally visceral, and we can use it to re-explain to people why we had to do healthcare reform in the first place, and to define their character as people who would take away your healthcare to get their way. So it's an opportunity. State government, the same way. All the state of Wisconsin has to do is create a state exchange. And if we won't do it, we're taking health care away from those 126,000 and growing people who get the subsidies. And so we should be putting pressure on them, which we will be doing. So, in a way, what this does is, if you think about politics this way, this changes the definition of success. Now, I've given you an example of how a real public backlash might change the Supreme Court decision, but even if it didn't, it would damage the conservative movement even further if we set this up. Can we create an opinion climate where we're making it really clear to people what they're doing, number one, and number two, we are putting forward proactive, positive agenda items that people want for them to reject, which will damage them and build up our movement. So we need to redefine victory. we're going to have them introduce bills that they're interested in, but they're not bills to be passed. They're bills to embarrass the other side on the right values and the right issues in order to reveal who they are and to put pressure on them and to build public support. So it's not just about words, it's about ideas. We need fresh, compelling ideas that can actually improve people's lives and realize our values in the world, and we need to sell them in a way that's credible, that makes people believe all these things are possible, for them to believe in their own country and their own democracy again. And so that's a big task. A lot of it's going to require organizing. The most profound form of communication is one-on-one individual persuasion. It is the most profound, it changes people more. So we need to be talking about these things in this way through grassroots, voluntary associations, from average people, peer-to-peer, people in their own committees talking to other people. Conservative ideology right now is about destroying any community of interest. Making people in Waukesha think that they are in competition with people in Milwaukee, and that's the problem. And that targeting people in Milwaukee is somehow good for them. They should just be angry with them and put all of their own fears and anxieties upon them. When in fact, the immense levels of poverty and low-wage jobs and poverty-wage jobs in Milwaukee drag down the whole economy and produce opportunity for everyone. And so we need to create that community of interest. And that's what we need to do at a values basis. And so we need to go after all the various conservative tactics which divide us, and then give people, this is really a faith-based kind of solution, real faith and hope in what can happen. We don't think that you can have a real strategy unless you have endpoints, goals in mind. It's like going on a road trip, not knowing where you're going. You're unlikely to get anywhere very attractive. And so on healthcare, for example, we've developed at Citizen Action, and we're sharing with other groups, a 10-year healthcare strategy. We're going to unveil it at our annual meeting on Friday, where we have decided where we want to go, what the Wisconsin healthcare system would look like, building on the Affordable Care Act in 2025. So I want to say to you that I think that there's a lot of hope here. In a way, to use a religious metaphor, being in the wilderness gives us the opportunity to build a much more profound movement that would actually realize the full promise of American life. And I'm not sure electing a bunch of kind of moderate corporate Democrats would have fundamentally done anything about our racial disparities, our poverty, and all the issues we have. The issues, I want to frame them as opportunities here. The issues are not just problems. They're gaps between our most profound fundamental values in society as it is now. It is our mission to close those gaps and realize our values in the world. But if we're going to lose temporarily, let's lose in a way that builds power and convinces a lot of people that we're right and they're wrong. And let's make them pay a price with the public for doing this. So let me end with that. I think we have to be positive. We have to bear down. We have to be mad at what's going on. But we have to be really inspired to build something here and build something that can transform our society. And I think that we will succeed ultimately because we're right and because we are just.